Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is the show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Kat Spada, and this is your Fortnightly FREQout mini-episode. If you're in the US, maybe you just got to have a day or two off of work for Thanksgiving, a holiday that I do my best to enjoy as a coincidental opportunity to celebrate gratitude with loved ones, while trying not to quote-unquote honor its historical contexts as a celebration of America's settler colonialism and the great violence and genocide that entails. Perhaps trying to have it both ways is a cheat, but sometimes you need some time off work as an excuse to spend time with friends and family, especially because we live in a dangerous and frightening world and moments of joy occasionally feel like lifelines. My family went out to dinner and a movie on Wednesday night as our Thanksgiving celebration, and I'll be sharing more on our movie choice later in this mini-episode. First, though, I'll thank whichever professor of mine showed me a short documentary news program when I was in college that I'm extremely grateful to have seen. On the evening after Thanksgiving in November 1960, CBS Reports aired Edward R. Murrow's investigative report on migrant farm workers in the United States, entitled Harvest of Shame. It's still stunning to me to think that this aired on one of the primary networks over 60 years ago, with the intention of shocking Americans into action. It's certainly a very of-its-time piece, but as a successor to John Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath, it portrays the impoverished, transient lifestyles of the families, often including child laborers, living in camps and working to source the food that was on so many viewers' holiday dinner tables the night before. You can watch the hour-long program on YouTube. There's a link in the show notes. And remember that all these decades later, the situation for farm workers is hardly better at all. This summer, I shared on these Fortnightly FREQout mini-episodes about the Writers Guild and SAG-AFTRA strikes. And there was labor solidarity out there on those picket lines from Teamsters, teachers, hospital workers, and delegates of the United Farm Workers. So for my Thanksgiving practice of gratitude, I've made a donation to support their organization, which was co-founded by Dolores Huerta and Cesar Chavez, at ufw.org/sparechange. I hope you'll consider giving to them as well. There's a link to do so in the show notes. With the days off that I took last week, I watched some really random stuff. Season 1 episodes of For All Mankind, Season 6 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, and at a Friendsgiving where I sat on the floor at the kids' table with some little ones, Turning Red and a few of the Harry Potter movies. Those kids were really enthralled by the big red panda. At home, I crocheted while catching up on some of the documentaries that were recently added to HBO Max. Little Richard, I Am Everything. It's an okay documentary about a very fascinating and troubled icon grappling with sexuality and the racism that limited the scope of his career while white artists capitalized on the rock music that he pioneered. Also, Albert Brooks' Defending My Life, which is an absolute love letter. It's not a warts and all type of thing. It's literally two best friends having a conversation and then other fans talking about how great he is. And honestly, I'm actually a little out of the loop on Albert Brooks, except that I am a big fan of his film Defending Your Life. I haven't really seen a lot of his other stuff, not even broadcast news, which I'm in trouble for. I just know it. But speaking of Harry Potter, there is a documentary called David Holmes, The Boy Who Lived, which profiles Holmes, the stunt performer who was permanently paralyzed when rehearsing a scene as Daniel Radcliffe's double on the 7th film in the franchise. For me and so many others, the Harry Potter books were greatly and undeniably significant to my adolescence, as I read them the day they were published, and grew up almost in lockstep with Harry and his classmates. I read the first book when I was 11, and I think the 7th book came out when I was 20. I was always less interested in the movies. They just weren't as important to me as the books were, and it was really, really easy for me to let go of this fandom when J.K. Rowling continued to show us what a hateful person she is. So, watching the documentary, it's a fairly straightforward story of what happens when a person is grievously injured during an accident on their high-risk job. But what makes it a more compelling film is the shared trauma that the actors and other members of the stunt crew continue to endure years after the incident. It's such an unusual circumstance, so rarefied to be in for Radcliffe and his mates from the Potter days, to all have this guilt and heartbreak and love and admiration for their friend David, all tied up in the movie machine that they were a part of, which changed their lives forever, his especially. There is a bit of inspiration porn in this, but David also shows the reality of what he goes through. I was very touched when he spoke about fellow patients in a physical rehab facility who had been paralyzed following acts of violence, and how, by comparison, he remains grateful that his injury came about after choosing a dream career on movie sets doing something he loved. So I'm really glad I watched this. It kind of was the first time I've really engaged with the Harry Potter film franchise since I was in high school, probably, and much more satisfying to see this human story. Now, as I alluded to the movie that my family watched as part of our Thanksgiving celebration, it was Taika Waititi's Next Goal Wins. I can't be alone in this. Perhaps you also have experienced the mental gymnastics of trying to find something for your whole family to watch in theaters or on TV that will check a lot of different demographic boxes. While I'd heard the middling to negative reviews, I figured that this movie would be satisfactory for a soccer-loving family with members spanning the political spectrum, and I was right. So for that, let me thank Taika for not making me have to pick Napoleon or Wish as my holiday viewing. As a rousing sports movie, it's fine. It's got Taika's distinct sense of humor, and it gives you enough to cheer for when you're following the story of the American Samoan football team training to qualify for the World Cup a decade after enduring the worst loss in international soccer history, 31-0 against Australia. But as a movie about characters, it's a real doozy. Michael Fassbender, himself, not without a spotless record. In fact, this movie recast Armie Hammer from a smaller role. Will Arnett now plays that character in the movie. No one seems to remember or care about Fassbender's alleged assault of his then-girlfriend in 2009, which is a very violent act if you read about it. But in any event, here he is playing a grieving, alcoholic train wreck who's thrust into this small U.S. colony to coach its failing soccer team. And the metric by which his growth as a person can be tracked is how transphobic he acts to one of his players. The real-life player, Jaya Sailua, is a groundbreaking athlete who's Fa'afafine, a Samoan third gender, and she says that in life, her relationship with Coach Thomas Rongan was pretty simple. He was the player, I was the coach, I think is exactly how she said it in the article I read, the interview with her. But in the film, it's really made a storytelling device. He aggressively confronts and dead names her at the beginning, and the next scene is her going to him to make amends. She apologizes for pushing him to the ground when he antagonized her and kind of picks him up out of his drunken stupor, and they watch some game tape. The movie gave me the sense that she does this not because she wants to make him a better man, but because she cares about her team. And so if she can do something to help by getting this coach on board, then she'll do it. But I might be meeting the screenwriting a little more than halfway there. And then later on, when they have the big match, they've gone to play against Tonga to try to qualify for the World Cup once again. This is what your sports movie's been building to. We've had our training montages. We've gotten to know and love the comedic tertiary characters. So then there's a half a scene where we see her looking at a bottle of pills, and then we see her acting really scattered, and she confesses to the coach that she stopped taking her hormones so that she could perform better on the pitch. Now, this is a reference to her choosing football over her hormones, which reportedly is based on her real experience. But again, in the movie, they don't really spell out for you why she made this choice, or was it ongoing? It seems like she literally decided to not take her pills for 1 or 2 days, and then she's a wreck. And I don't know. It just kind of happens. Like, it happens because the movie needs a bit of drama right here before the game starts. And then we get this like, wow, the coach has really come around in his bond with Jaya. He's starting to be reminded of his daughter. Isn't this a heartwarming portrayal of a man who needs to be a father in order to respect women? Like, okay. I'm always here for the character, for the characters in a story. And I felt like all of them were given short shrift. Taika has spoken. I mean, Taika, he's out here. He's doing, if he's like, look, I'm going to take a paycheck to do this. I get to film in Hawaii with a lot of like Polynesian or Samoan actors. Cool. He said in a video I watched that he was having fun with the white savior trope in making this movie. Like, what am I never going to tell a story where there's a white savior? Like, Hollywood makes those movies. I'm going to make one, and I'm just going to kind of embrace it and push it to the limit, and maybe we'll have some fun with that. Even in shots where, like, the team all lift up Michael Fassbender and, like, carry him into the water as if he's being baptized. I think he just was like, lol, let's do that. Mostly, look, I'm glad that Jaya Sailua, the real Fa'afafine, a soccer player, she's been able to get out there, go on the press junket for this movie, tell her story to a broader audience, and I hope she gets a book deal out of it. But yeah, as a movie, there was a lot that could have been done to make this part of the story, which is a significant part of the story, is the relationship between these two characters, way less maddening. Otherwise, it's like a by-the-book sports movie, and I'm down for a sports movie. I will watch a sports movie about a sport I don't care at all about if it's a story well told. So the fact that like all of the heart of this really comes from this relationship that's poorly told is a bummer because honestly, they could have just been like focused on all of the other characters and it might have been less annoying. So that's Next Goal Wins. And I don't know, there's a documentary about the same story that's from 9 years ago, same title. I might check that out just to see if like, am I just as compelled by this soccer story and the story of Jaya Sailua without the like, well, we need to have a dramatic beat that goes here and then we need to have a redemption that goes there, which just felt really phoned in. That has been all for this episode of Feminist Frequency Radio. I'm on Twitter and stuff at cat_ex_machina, and you can follow the podcast on all of the socials at FemFreak. Plus, this week I was a guest on the Trek, Marry, Kill podcast talking about a Season 2 episode of Star Trek Voyager, along with my partner Ethan Harper, who was with me last week on our Feminist Frequency episode about Scott Pilgrim. So go on and check that out. The link is in the show notes. Next week, I have a full-length episode for you about one of the most deranged Christmas movies of all time. I'll leave the teaser at that, but also have a delightful guest from Stage and Screen for you there. All right, see you next time.